Even today, at this very moment, we remember our friend and colleague here at the NTA who passed on recently and has now been laid to rest. She was a sister, wife, and mother, and definitely one of NTA's best minds. Shikeola Eunice Ipinaye, my friend. I'd like to dedicate the rest of the program to late Shikeola, and in remembering and honoring our memories, I'd like to throw up a conversation on how we can begin to take more personal responsibilities for our health and well-being, even as we focus on pursuing our careers, our professions, and vocations. If you have an office or an office-type job and a busy schedule, and you find it difficult to make out time for your health and well-being, well, our next conversation applies to you. My guest is Dr. Kaswe Ifeanyi. He's a public health expert. Doc, welcome to the program.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Nnamdi.
Doc, I would like, we're discussing this whole issue of hectic job schedule, and I'm sure you're used to telling your patient and some folks out there with heavy work or heavy, work schedule to take a break, and that life's too short. In the midst of all that is happening around us in terms of prevalence of cardiovascular diseases, stress, fatigue, and mental health issues and disorder, how critical is it to create that work-life balance that puts health and well-being at the top of the shelf, even somewhere, someplace above work?
Thank you. I would want to put out a work definition for this conversation. And I will reference two authorities. Of course, the first one is the World Health Organization that aptly defined health not as the absence of disease, but rather the state of physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being of an individual. That's WHO's working definition for this conversation. Now I refer to another authority, the Britannica, that defined health as the extent an individual can, one, physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially cope with his or her environment. Now, if you situate this, the later definition will be more apt for our conversation today because it speaks about the extent to which an individual will, in these various spheres, physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially cope with his environment. And so what is the environment in this conversation? The workplace is the environment. The place where you work is the environment. I will create an allegory or an analogy to help take this message. If you get a pond today and you take a golden fish, very, very healthy golden fish, and you put that fish in a pond as it continues to take in oxygen and produce carbon dioxide, over time, the water will become toxic. That water is the environment of the fish. So the fish is a living being comparable to an individual who works in a place. Now, he comes into the place fresh. You leave school, you are engaged, and then you work in a place. As you continue to work there, sometimes and most times, the place has its own ambience. It has its own peculiarities, and they start taking a toll. Just the way the fish was putting out carbon monoxide, altering the pH of the pool, and over time could become sick. And so if you meet those who rear fish, the first thing they do when fishes become sick is that they change water. And so that speaks volume about the impact of work environment, of your environment on your health. Now, you have talked about hectic work and all those. There are things we need to clarify in our public service, in our work rule in this country. If you go to some developed climes like the United Kingdom, you find out that in a week, you cannot work more than 30 hours cumulatively. In Nigeria, if you are
And that is as a rule.
oh yes, in fact, if you violate it, you are punished. Yes, you are punished. So in Nigeria, those of us in public service, call government work as is known, you find out that if you are religious with your duties, you will be putting minimum of 40 hours in a week, 8 to 4 times 5. So already we have 10 hours in excess of work when compared with the United Kingdom. In fact, in the United Kingdom, it's around 27 hours. So that is the situation. That is one. Now, there are things we do in the past, or that were done in the past, that are fast disappearing from the work ecosystem in Nigeria. You walk into a workplace like a known public corporate company, you will find a functional canteen. It's no more in most places. You walk into a place, it's only the military that is still retaining stuff like that, where they still have their mess, they have their canteen. You know, before in the military, I don't know whether it is still the practice, if you are posted on a beat, they will bring your ration. The essence of that is to ensure that while delivering on your duty, you eat healthy. That's not commonplace anymore. There were professions or specialties in the past, particularly in the medical parlance in Nigeria, that is gradually going into extinction. That is what was known then as occupational health and safety. In developed world, it is still top-notch. It is their duty to provide direction, advisory, and guide government policy on how to manage workers in the place of work with regard to being fit and proper. One of the things I will say again is that we have come to a point where we have blurred the delineation between between fitness and being healthy or health. They do not mean the same thing. They are not synonyms. Fitness simply means an individual ability to cope with athletic activity. That is fitness. So you can do that, but you are not healthy and you do not have health. If you align that to the earlier definition I put out for this discussion. So, what are the issues? The other day, I learned that the military had their normal promotion exercise, and in the course of their physical activity, which is a prelude to the real promotion exercise, a senior military officer, while doing press-up, slumped. That is fitness, which probably he's used to, but because there's an underlying disease, he's not in good health, he passed away. So fitness and health, even though fitness promotes health and is ancillary to health, it is not a replacement.
Thing. So,
yes.
So, Doc, I reckon it is therefore important to point out that prioritizing health and well-being in spite of an intense workplace schedule doesn't necessarily translate as being which doesn't translate or translates as not being selfish. I don't know whether you get it. When self-care, for instance, doesn't mean I'm being selfish or indulgent. And if I'm to tie that to what you've said about organizations and things that existed in the past that seem to have blurred or disappeared, it would seem that most organizations seem to prioritize employees' health on paper, and of course their well-being. But then again, the demands of work and the struggle to meet targets often undercut that obligation. When you speak in terms of working environments and even how these environments can be a significant source of stress, with substantial effects, not just on the employee's well-being, but on their healthcare expenses as well. How then, in evolving a solution now and going forward, because we have policies in place, for instance, in the civil service, for instance, and I'll give you the example, it says that you can take a leave after working for some period of time. You can then go on leave. You can choose to go on vacation and all of that. But then, how much so of this is implemented? Do you think as a policy, there should be some sort of workable policy, thoroughly, and effectively implemented in not just in the Nigerian public sector, but of course in the private sector as well, that ensure that workplaces, organizations prioritize employees' health and well-being?
Now, thank you. I will start from the last part of what you said. In some international setting, international organizations, even though you are a staff, they do an annual contract review or renewal. And for you to progress through that contract renewal, they would subject you to real-time medical examination. In Nigerian public service, that is not the case. Every year we complete APA form. Which component of the APA form evaluates the state of your health? It doesn't happen. So even for some institutions, because I know some institutions, particularly uniform organization, where in the APA form they will ask you to go to their medical unit to sign. You find that it's been reduced to the point of only a signature from a medical officer on the form, not real-time evaluation of the state of your health. So you find out that in policy, our policy is not throughput in the area of synchronizing workplace support for the health of the worker. That is not sine qua non in Nigeria. So a lot of deficiencies exist. Now the point is, what do we do?
Okay.
One of the things I would say to every worker is that once you drop, another person replaces you.
And that's
once
the fact.
you drop, it is not sweet to the ear, but once you drop,
The work must go on.
before you are buried, you are replaced. And so if that is at the back of your mind, you will know that you have absolute responsibility to stay well and alive. Okay. It is absolutely is your own. It's not a third party responsibility. Now, the worker must be responsible for his own health. But the point is that the employer must make provision. Again, several policy somersault has eliminated some things that supported workers' health. We had government agencies and ministries initially having their own medical centers, or at best clinics, to address issues that may arise in the course of work or while the employee is at workplace. Over time, we came with policies that have eroded all that. I want to say that that is not mutually exclusive with the National Health Insurance Scheme or universal coverage. I want to think that government must come back with that policy that if you have a certain number of workforce, you should have a clinic in situ. If you also have places where people have to work long hours, you must begin to make room for common room. This has disappeared. It used to be in place. These are things that will support health. I also know, I remember one person when he was the Corps Marshal and Chief Executive of Federal Road Safety, Osita Chidoka. He made it mandatory that there was Corps Marshal end of the month jogging. The idea is to bring out the workforce and ensure that they take some form of physical fitness activity. And because it's a regimented institution, people complied. So we may not use that regimentation approach, but workers in places where they have cluster of number can introduce recreational activities. We have union, we have cooperatives, just so we can gather money. Why wouldn't we aggregate ourselves into formations for sporting activity, for recreational activity that will help to support physical fitness?
I hear you, Dr. Kashmir. I hear you, and I hear you loud. I mean, this is a conversation that I don't think we can take as a one-off. I think it should be an ongoing conversation so that we continue to raise consciousness on this issue. One would expect that being a personal decision, I mean, your health as a worker, as a career person, a professional, with a heavy work schedule, your health and well-being would be a very easy decision to make. But that is not often the case. And but very quickly, rounding off, I would just like for you I will reel out some elements that I consider quite important that I researched on, and this is in rounding off our conversation, and then you tell me how important or imperative they are in the life of a worker. First, I'll begin with the issue of sleep. How much sleep is recommended, or how much amount of sleep do you think is recommended to revitalize and energize a worker, perhaps a heavy work schedule for another day's work? Quickly, Doc.
There are divergent school of thought on the requisite sleep hour that will help rejuvenate you.
Okay.
Some school of thought holds strongly that for an adult person, 5 hours in the minimum will be enough to rejuvenate you to carry on the next.
Is that
day.
what you would recommend?
Some school of thought will also advocate for 8 hours work. But 5 or 8 hours is not the issue. I hope you know that the work culture in Nigeria is such that when you are not through with files, you take them home. It is an aberration. It is not a virtue. We should stop it. The head of service should make a policy in that regard, that people should stop taking work home. Because that means you bottle yourself in the office and you carry the leftover to
carry the
house.
office to the home.
And you go there to continue the same pressure. The thing about environment is that I want to say one thing.
Very quickly.
Your environment, whether office or home,
yes,
honestly will determine the state of your health, because we don't actually catch diseases. We create diseases and then subsequently end the disease.
Dr. Kashmir Ifeanyi, public health expert, I did promise that we'll continue this conversation, and I absolutely mean that. We will continue this conversation and definitely have a part 2, perhaps a part 3, and maybe a part 4 of this conversation. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on Insight.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you, viewers.
And that's it on this episode of the program. Do join us same time next week for more on Insight. My name is Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.